Hey, my name is Krishna. Welcome back to the channel. In this video, we'll do something a little bit different. So my Mac Mini M4 video got a lot of traction on YouTube and there were a lot of questions. And I thought I'd just go ahead and share again my experiences with the Mac Mini now that I've had a chance to use it for about a month for design work, primarily using Photoshop and Premiere. And I just wanted to, share some questions that some viewers had with regards to my setup and things related to my setup. So without further ado, just to clarify, the specs that I got were the standard base model M4 Mac Mini. I bumped up the RAM from 16 to 24 gigs. I also bumped up the storage from 256 to 512. I felt like that would be a pretty good amount to work with for the type of work that I was going to do. I didn't really have any basis or previous insight into those particular specs, but I did come from a 2018 Mac Mini that had 32 gigs of RAM and 256 gigs of storage, and I was running into a storage issue with the Intel Mac Mini. So basically bumped up the storage, doubled it basically, and I've got a bunch of external SSDs that are hanging off from it. And then the RAM, it was a little bit of a hard sell here in terms of I could have gone with 32 gigs, but Apple charges an insane amount for memory upgrades. And I felt like with the unified memory, 24 gigs should be good enough. And, my testing, it has, been the case. It's like I haven't run into any issue where the machine is complaining that it needs more memory. So I feel pretty good with my design decision. So that leads me to the very first question. So Tito asks, do you think 24, 5, 12 gigs is enough? Or am I going for the 32 or even 48 gigs on the M4 Pro? So I can't speak to the M4 Pro. I'm sure it's plenty fast. Several questions in the comments were like, why didn't you go for the M4 Pro? What's wrong with that? It's only a couple $100 more. Well, I'm on a budget and I had to go ahead and make some decisions, and for my budget and for what I'm using the machine for, I thought that the M4 with, the updated specs, like I've mentioned before, were good enough. So, if you're doing something really heavy duty, like you're doing a lot of intense 3D rendering, stuff like that, then go for the Pro. But I'm not doing that. I'm pretty much in a 2D space and using, the, basic design tools like Photoshop and Premiere, and it seems to sing pretty well. In fact, I've been more and more impressed with the fact that the rendering times in Premiere, it's like a 1-to-1. For 1 minute of footage, it takes 1 minute to render out. It's pretty fast. And I make short form videos, typically between 7 to 20 minutes, and they render out really, really quick. So I've got no complaints on that front. Okay, why did you upgrade the base model and not get the Pro for a few $100s more? For better resale value or performance? I don't really buy machines to resell them. I use them until I no longer need them, right? So typically that's between 4 to 5 years. Didn't want to spend a lot of money. I spent about $1,800 on the Intel Mac Mini years ago, 2018. I also had to buy an eGPU for it. So when it was all said and done, it was about roughly $2,200 back in 2018. So, things have gotten a lot better in terms of Apple's dedicated silicon processors, and just felt like I didn't necessarily need to spend that kind of money, given the performance threshold going from an Intel i7 to an M4. I felt like I should be okay. Let's see, at Everspace Time, why wouldn't you use an iPad instead? So my answer to that question in the comments was different strokes for different folks. Just because some folks are using an iPad doesn't mean I have to. I have an iPad mini. I've also had an iPad Pro. I just don't like drawing on it. It doesn't have the proper texture. I use keyboard shortcuts. It doesn't have the full version of Photoshop. I know that there's Procreate. I've dabbled with Procreate. I'm sure it's a fantastic tool, but it's just not for me. And that's okay. It's what makes the world go round, variety. At Kalia9176 writes, how large is the partition for your scratch disk? Well, I ended up getting a new 4 terabyte SSD for my Mac Mini because there was a great deal on Amazon. It was like about $200. And I partitioned that and using disk utility, and I've got roughly 600 gigs for the scratch disk. It's plenty more than I will actually ever need, but it's there. And then I have another partition that is used for temp storage. So like if I'm ingesting footage from my phone or bringing in other assets, I have like a temp area that's also about roughly 600 gigs in space. And then I periodically just nuke that stuff after about a month. I have a script that will go ahead and take care of that for me. And then I have another 1 terabyte, I think 2 terabytes left over, which I use for just local storage for the stuff that I'm currently working on. Okay, at Mookhouse6 writes, what ports are you using to connect to your Cintiq? So that's a great question. Cintiqs typically come with a couple of cable options. There's the DV cables, there's also HDMI. And because I'm using another display that has a dedicated HDMI input with my Mac Mini, I opted to get a converter cable that would basically convert from HDMI to USB. I've had zero problems, no lag, nothing. It just works great. So super satisfied with it. And if you have a Cintiq of a recent vintage, that might be the way to go. I do like the flexibility of the Thunderbolt 4 ports on my Mac. I've got pretty much every port in the back stuffed, and that is on top of extra Thunderbolt hubs. I don't have a CalDigit hub. I have an Anker hub, and I have a OWC hub. And I've got one hub for my MacBook Pro, and I've got another hub for the Mac Mini. And I'm glad that we have a lot of port selection. I do have external speakers hooked up to my Mac Mini, and I do have to route that cable towards the front. Kind of looks a little bit like an eyesore, but you know what? I don't care. I'm not creating a fancy, desk setup video. Everything is about functionality for me. If it happens to look neat, that's a bonus. So anyway, those are some of my thoughts on the M4 Mac Mini 1 month later. I've really enjoyed using it. It's been a really fast, productive machine. I've had zero issues with it since the video that I made earlier. It just seems to work fine. And if you're in the market for a new Mac Mini and you're planning on using it for 2D design work, I think 24,512 is pretty good. Of course, if you've got more money and you want to spend more, that's entirely up to you. But for my use case, it's more than good enough. So that's it. Hope you found some value in this video. Stick around for more art tutorials coming up soon. Thanks so much for subscribing, and I will catch you in the next one.